Hello and welcome back to Puck on the Parkway. It's 2020-24. We are into or about to be into the second half of the NHL season in 2023-2024. And it's a big spot for the New Jersey Devils. They sit right on the edge of the playoff line. A big matchup coming tomorrow night against the Tampa Bay Lightning for what will decide, at least for the time being, who holds the wild card spot in the Eastern Conference. I'm James Burley alongside Daniel Rebane here, talking Devils hockey again into the new year. Daniel, how are we doing? How was your new year?
Hey man, happy New Year to everybody out there. Happy New Year to you, James. 2024, 10 days in. Michigan won a national title. So I'm hyped about that. That was a great time watching the semifinal against Alabama and the national title against Washington. But we're on to hockey. The Devils have had today would have been their fourth day off, I believe, right? And we
Yep.
we're back tomorrow with some hockey, and this is a big one. Like obviously Tampa Bay has 4 games in hand on us, but this is a 4 point game. We get that victory, and we're looking pretty decent for wild card places. Obviously, there's still half a season to go, but these points mean more now that we've been struggling the first half of the season.
Yeah, the things haven't gone according to plan really for the Devils. If you look at how they performed last year, 112 points, the franchise record, 52 wins, and they really just took the league by storm with a great year that nobody saw coming with so many youth players, 63-point turnover. And yeah, it's safe to say that this season won't mirror that as well. It could still very well be a successful year for New Jersey, but they're gonna have to do it with a lot of key pieces, a lot of players injured now. And you mentioned that 4 or 5 day layoff could be a big help to the Devils, who have been killed by back-to-backs. They lost the second half of a back-to-back this past weekend to the mighty Vancouver Canucks, who put 6 goals up against each of the New York area teams on their trip to the metropolitan area. 6 goals against the Devils, Rangers, and Islanders. They're cruising, Jack Hughes and Luke's brother Quinn, captaining the Vancouver Canucks to what is a historic season for them, the likes of which they have not seen in about 10 years. So congrats to the Vancouver Canucks. They're taking the
Yeah.
Western Conference by storm, similar to the way the New Jersey Devils did last year. I see a lot of similarities between the high energy system that both of those teams play, but it would be that high energy system that took the wind out of the Devils' sails on Sunday or Saturday rather, January the 6th. And the Devils had a good comeback in that one after a strong win against the Blackhawks the night before, one where they had to come from behind after conceding early in the first. Against the Canucks, they actually went down. They were down 5-2 and brought it back to 5-4 for a moment there. 2 goals from Colin Miller, one from Brendan Smith that was later corrected and credited to, I believe, Nico Daws. So it
Mhm.
was a good day from some unlikely sources. But in that game, they were without Jack Hughes, who was injured in the third period on Friday against Chicago. A little bit of an inconspicuous injury. Not too many people knew it even had happened until after the game. And it was, ironically enough, the same game where Connor Bedard was taken out by Brendan Smith in the first period. He just underwent surgery on a broken jaw. He's going to be out for a couple months. Hughes going to be out for 1 month. I guess we'll start with taking a look at this past weekend, how much time they're going to have off going into tomorrow night against Tampa for a big game, like you mentioned, and how are they going to fare with these injuries as a whole? Because we've already known that their goaltending hasn't been up to snuff, and now they're going to be without both Dougie Hamilton, who's been out long term, Jonas Siegenthaler with a broken foot. He's going to be on the injured reserve for quite some time now. And you can add Jack Hughes to that list along with Timo Meyer. Things aren't getting better. We've seen this before. Is it going to be as dramatic of a problem for these Devils as it was in the past? I fear that it might.
Yeah. Last year was I mean, we kind of had the perfect year last year. Not many injuries. I mean, Jack was only out what 5 games or something like that. He played 74 games or whatever it was. So
Roughly, yeah.
when your best players are missing for huge parts of the season, like Nico was at the beginning of the year with a concussion that we thought it was concussion. Now Jack out for a second time. Timo Meyer's been on and off. Andre Palat's now there. Dougie Hamilton, we know, is out into the playoffs most likely. Now Siegenthaler with his broken foot. I mean, they can't catch a break right now. And the depth is being challenged right now. Obviously, we've seen a couple guys get called up from Utica now with Shane Bowers, Cal Foote, Max Willman. I mean, if they can if they can just hold a playoff spot until some of these big guys get back, like Jack and Timo get back, I mean, that'd be a good motivation for this team, kind of bring the boys together. Like, hey man, the big boys aren't here, but we still got a job on our hands to get this team into the playoffs. But yeah, injuries suck. And I think we got blessed last year, and that's why we're so good. Like when you're consistent, not many injuries are taking a toll on you. You're gonna have good regular seasons, and obviously it's been the opposite this year.
Well, there's good news where there's bad news. The good news is players like Jesper Bratt, who are on a point per game, are still healthy or above a point per game, actually. Nico Hischier, who, if you look at the wins loss record with and without him,
Mhm.
he's still healthy. And that is huge for the Devils because I don't have the number right in front of me, but it is dramatically in favor of wins when Nico Hischier is on the ice for the New Jersey
Yeah.
Devils. He's just that important of a player, the captain, first overall pick from the 2017 NHL entry draft. Not to mention Dawson Mercer heating up. He's still in the lineup. Alex Holtz leads the team in goals at 5-on-5. He's healthy. So there are still pieces where perhaps they weren't even last year for this Devils team to siphon some more scoring from. But that said, a lot of experience as well, especially on the back end, isn't around. And I think it's going to be more focused on the blue line than it will be on the forwards to make up the absence. I'm not saying that the absence of Jack Hughes won't be felt. It absolutely will. But
Yeah.
perhaps the absence of both Dougie Hamilton and Jonas Siegenthaler together will be bigger, if not more important than anything else, because that's your top pairing of defense, both out for a long term. That is a
Well,
big, big deal.
well, when you look at it now, you look from last year, we were missing two full pairings from
Yeah.
last year, basically. So, I mean, it's been great that Nemec has stepped up the way he has, and Luke has stepped up the way he has. Obviously, like we expected these guys to be superstars in the future, but they're being thrown into this at 19 years old, 20 years old. So good on them for taking that next step and being NHL players because this team kind of needs it right now. And
Mhm.
talking about the depth again, like you look at this could be your chance now. Look at Nemec. We thought he'd mostly be in the minors this year until like maybe the end of the year when you get a look. But now he's going to be a full-time NHLer even when Dougie Hamilton comes back. So some of those guys down there like Willman, like some of these depth guys that were brought in to be that depth, they have a chance on their hand to cement their place in the bottom six whenever everybody comes back because obviously the Devils have their top six, but fourth line's kind of been all over this year. So maybe you can carve out a spot for yourself.
Well, the fact of the matter is, this blue line is going to be tested and tested and tested, and it doesn't
Hmm.
help that the goaltending has, and I mean, and no Devils fan needs reminding of this, but the goaltending has been putrid, to be polite.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about some guys stepping in for some of the injuries from Utica, I think it's worth talking about Nico Daws, who has come in from Utica as well, but perhaps more of a strategic decision, excuse me, for Tom Fitzgerald rather than a one due with injury because Akira Schmidt's got 12 games left of his 12 NHL games left until he is waiver eligible
Yeah.
and therefore has been sent down to get more time in Utica because his numbers, while better than Vitek and I think for the moment are still better than Nico Daws, has not been good enough to shoulder the burden of being a 1A, 1B starter in an NHL season. So I think it's probably the right call from Fitzgerald to send him down, get him more game time in Utica while he can without being picked up off of waivers. And then Nico Daws comes in, who's had a very strong season in Utica despite the team struggling and in last place in the North Division in the AHL. He has been strong, and he came in with a couple wins actually in Jersey. His first time playing in the NHL level since that god awful 2021-22 injury riddled season where the Devils featured as many as seven starting netminders. And I think Nico Daws, I think it's pretty clear, actually was the best of the seven that played that year, and didn't really get much of a chance to come back into the fold due to the likes of Vanacek, Schmid, and Blackwood until now. Specifically, what about Nico Dawes' game have you noticed in comparison to Vanacek and Schmid, other than he's kept the puck out of the net a bit better. Anything specifically about him that has made it work better? Is it just because he's a little bit more green and the pressure's down? I think that's certainly an element of it, but I really think positionally he's a very sound goaltender who doesn't make flashy saves. He's very grounded, very deep in the paint, and he's good at reactionary saves because he squares up to the puck really well. But I can't say that I'm with the Devils fans who are immediately saying this guy's our number one. Let's switch to him because that seems a little too early to make any sort of decision regarding the goaltender in that way.
Yeah, look into the future. Right now, the Devils don't have a clear-cut number one heading into the future. But going back to your point on what's been the biggest thing we've seen from Dawes is, I mean, he's whenever you kind of need him to make a save, he's been making those saves. Obviously, we've still given up goals with him in net, but some of these like saves that he's making, Vitek or Schmid would have been easily giving up earlier in the year. So he's been giving us chances. Obviously, against Vancouver, you kind of saw that. They still gave up six goals, five when he was in the net. But I mean, he was trying his damn hardest to keep us in those in that game. And I think that's just all we need from a goalie right at this point. We don't need a flashy goalie that's going to have all the numbers. We just need a goalie that's going to make a key save here and then to keep us in games. Because if our team is in games, they have a chance to win the game. I mean, this team can score with anybody when we're fully healthy. So that's what I've liked from Dawes so far. He's been making like good saves on breakaways. Like breakaways, you give up a breakaway and be like, oh well, that's a goal given up. Dawes makes a save. You're like, oh wow, here we go. This is something different. And when he's making saves in front of these guys, I mean, it kind of you get more motivation. You're like, wow, we got someone that could bail us out whenever we need. And I think that's all the team kind of needed at the moment. We'll see these games coming up with Jack Hughes out and other big time players out, but maybe with those big time players out, it sends a message to the boys like, hey, we got to play a bit more structured now that Jack and Timo and Palat are out. We have to make sure that we protect the house before we turn this into offense.
And before we move on and take a look at perhaps some of the Devils' next games and maybe what's going on more specifically in the AHL and Utica, I want to ask, I don't know if you saw Amanda Stein's tweet from today about the Devils power play lines at practice.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if you saw it, but
I saw a bit.
the second group, I'll pull up the personnel now, um, is Simon Nemec, Eric Holla, Alex Holtz, Chris Tierney, and Nate Bastian are getting power play time together. And I think that just goes to show that yeah, not every player you want to be there is there right now. But also, it's worth mentioning Dawson Mercer was working on the penalty kill the other end. Likely he'd be on the second power play unit, if not the first. So maybe one of Tierney or Bastion isn't in there, and
Yeah.
we're reading in too much. But I think that's just goes to show that things are not great for the Devils at the moment. Certainly a lot of injuries to big players that are hampering their success right now.
Yeah, looking at the power play, I mean, why don't we just give McLeod a chance on the second PP, man? Like, you're giving Tierney power play time. No offense to Tierney, but I thought he'd be in the AHL most of this year. Michael McLeod's scored 10 goals this year for the first time in his career, and he's probably been our most consistent player all year, other than like Jesper Bratt or Jack Hughes whenever he's healthy. What give him? We have Nate Bastian on the power play. No offense to him, but I don't know what he's doing on the power play. Might as well
Yeah.
just you put Michael McLeod taking faceoffs, like faceoffs, have him in front in the bumper. I mean, I think he could be a good piece to that second PP at the moment with players out. So I don't know. That's
I
just me. I
I
think he
think
could do it.
I think he definitely could do it, especially the way he's been playing this year. I think there's also a chance though that he's was working on penalty kill at the same time, perhaps next to Mercer. And that's why. And I think maybe we see one of or both of them on the power play together tomorrow night in Tampa, which is of course the first of several games on the road against the Atlantic Division. They play Tampa tomorrow night at Amalie Arena. Then they stay in Florida against the Panthers on Saturday. Then they travel up north to Boston on Monday. Realistically, realistically, this game against the Lightning, you said it, it's a 4-pointer. It absolutely is. The Panthers and Bruins, you can already pencil them in to finish in confirmed spots in the Atlantic Division. At least in my opinion, you could. And that's a tough road trip. Really
That's
tough.
yeah, that's a tough road trip, man.
Geographically, not too bad, right? You're only traveling up and down the East Coast once, but that's three of the hardest teams in the Eastern Conference. 3 points out of six on this one. Do you call it a success?
I'd call that a massive success. I was gonna say if they can beat Tampa, I'd take that out of those three games. Obviously, you would want more points, but I mean, Florida is one of the best teams in the league right now.
Eastern Conference champions.
Boston is still great. We saw that when we went up there. So I mean, Tampa's playing good still, but like they're the most vulnerable of the three. So if you can go down there, steal 2 points, I think that'd be fine for me.
Yeah. The Bruins coming off of an OT win against the Kings and a big loss actually to the Bruins where they lost by 4. But other than that, they've been on something of a roll lately, putting themselves back in the discussion in the Atlantic Division, which, previously they probably wouldn't have been in. But we've got a lot of guys coming up from Utica this
Yeah.
week, and as naturally, Cal Foote, Shane Bowers, Max Willman, who's already played at the NHL level this year, Graham
hmm
Clark. Um, Real quick, as of now, the most recent or in this most recent game, Brendan Smith featured as a forward and took defensive shifts on the penalty kill, but there's a chance where now we see him return to the blue line for
Yeah.
an extended period of time, and that moves Shane Bowers into the lineup, perhaps Max Willman and Graham Clark. Who do you see filling in? I guess next to Chris Tierney on that fourth line, there's two open spots for Utica guys to come in and claim them, and then unless you keep Smith as a forward and you bring in Cal Foote to play as your sixth defenseman.
Yeah. So Graham Clark's right now, he's back in Utica. He's playing in the game tonight. So personally, I think we'll see Max Woolman and Shane Bowers step in. Bowers is a former first round pick of Colorado a couple of years ago. We got him in the Riley Walsh trade with Boston in the offseason. I don't think he's done much in Utica this year, but hey man, fourth line's the fourth line. You put Max Woolman, Chris Tierney, and Shane Bowers on there. There's nothing really to talk about. They're just gonna get probably 6 minutes a game, and the top nine are probably gonna have to do the heavy lifting. So, I mean, that's why I kind of you would want to you when Graham Clark came up, you would want him playing, like in the middle six. Instead, he was playing fourth line with Brendan Smith and Chris Tierney. You're like, all right. And obviously he didn't do much when he was up here. He got what? How many minutes did he get in that one game he was here? I think he got 7 minutes, maybe.
Yeah,
So
if that.
yeah, so the fourth line for right now. It's gonna be mixed mash until everybody gets healthy. So hopefully they could come up here and make an impact. Obviously, I'd love them to make an impact, but I'm not expecting much out of them. And yeah, we'll probably see Brendan Smith back on D.
Probably see Brendan Smith back on D. I know that's not what a lot of people want to hear. It's certainly not. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. He really is valuable as a defenseman on the penalty kill, for one.
When
As
he's
we
on
speak,
when he's on the ice
yeah,
and not in
exactly
the
right. When
box.
he's on the ice and not serving the penalty. That's a very good distinction. As of now, though, the Comets are actually winning over the Laval Rockets in their, I think this is the third game of a 3-game almost series between the two. I'm not sure who has the goal at the moment, but it's an early one.
Graham
And
Clark got an assist on the power play,
Graham Clark
I
with an
think.
assist, so good
Yeah.
for him to keep it rolling. He's sort of been the crown jewel of things going on in Utica the past couple seasons.
He's an all-star, so he just got
Yeah,
selected to the all-star team. So
is
shout out
is
to
is
him.
th- is there someone you want to start talking about with other than him? I'd be surprised if there were.
Um, the only like Utica has not been the best this year. Obviously, when you look at their lineup, there's some prospects there that you want to watch, and then there's other guys that are like veteran guys trying to still get their name out there, get call ups like Max Woolman, Sam LeBear's down there. But let's talk about Daniel Mazul. I mean, coming over from the KHL, he was a third round pick, maybe a second round pick. I forget what round it was. But I mean, he's looked impressive this year. You look at his number, his offensive numbers have popped off the page. In the KHL, he was a strictly defensive defenseman. Is able to do, move the puck up the ice. But this year so far, I think he has 9 points, 3 goals. He has 3 goals, which is more than he ever put up in the KHL in 3 or 4 years that he was over there. So obviously, when Siegenthaler went down, I was like, maybe this kid gets a call up. But obviously, they love Brendan Smith, so he's gonna replace him. But that's a kid. I'd say keep an eye out if there's any more injuries going forward
Right.
because right now he's bringing a two-way game. He's physical. He could fight, and I mean he's been a stud. I've liked what I've seen so far this year from him.
Important to note, Cal Foot coming up, right shot defenseman,
Hmm.
and now there's, I would say, an abundance of that between the defensemen that the Devils have up right now. So that does point to Brendan Smith getting back on the blue line long term. Missoula is +1 on the year. Cal Foot -14 in Utica this year. Just to throw that out there, something that's we're keeping an eye on. And while Xavier Perron leads the team in points with 24, he's -9. Graham Clark right behind him with 22 points is +2. So maybe it factors into some decisions that are being made, but not all. There's a lot goes into who comes up and who doesn't. Um, is there anyone else you want to talk about quickly? Ryan Schmelzer is one that jumps off the page for me as someone who could have been brought up here but wasn't. Again, though, I'm not super upset with the decisions that were made in terms of roster moves. It's just Tom Fitzgerald had his hand forced and had to make some calls.
Yeah, I don't think Schmelzer is actually on an NHL deal.
Oh, is that
So
so?
yeah, I think he's just an AHL guy. I've he's a good solid veteran. The other guy you could have brought up to play bottom six is Chase Stillman, but as
Mhm.
I've said this on Twitter. I don't think he's or X now. I don't think he's ready. He's only been in the AHL for 21 some games, and he's still raw. Like obviously he had that hot start. He's kind of cooled off since. I'd say just let him cook down there. Let him get the games. Don't put any more pressure than even though the Devils and Fitzgerald have told him what his role is going to be when he eventually gets called up. Getting a call up when you've only had 20 pro games is that's a not many players get that type of a call up unless
Mhm.
you're special. So let him stay in Utica, get some more game time under him, and just let him grow. That's why I said Max Woolman and Shane Bowers was fine calling up. Let them
Yeah.
take the 7 minutes on the fourth line because that they're fine with that. So let other than Chase Stillman, there's Utica's had a down year, I would say so far.
That's
So,
fair. I think
but
they would take that.
yeah, it's fun watching when they have success. But so far this year, they've been up and down. So not many prospects on the team to talk about.
Hmm. Right. Well, then, if there's not prospects on the team to talk about, let's look around the NHL because it's no mystery the Devils are still in talks about bringing in some players. And um, well, there's been some notable trades considering the whole Cutter Gauthier and Jamie Drysdale deal. Let's talk about some other potential targets briefly that the Devils could bring in. We talked ad nauseum about this last time because we had a special segment just all about it.
Yep.
Um, I think one we can start with, though, is another defenseman who may be on the block. The Devils now with another injury to a key blue liner in need of some presence on the back end. And Jakob Chychrun is another name that has been thrown out. We talked about Noah Hannafin specifically a lot last week, and this is another guy who brings about a similar profile and a similar level of respect across the NHL. And that this is a top guy. This is one of your top D men. This guy comes into your team and he's a top pairing guy playing at least a third of the game.
Yeah.
So this is a real game changer type of move should the Devils bring him in. And it's one that I think is worth exploring because there's a really good chance Tom Fitzgerald has made that call.
Yeah, and again, he was traded last year to Ottawa, and everybody was thinking, wow, Ottawa made a great move. They're building towards the future. They might make the playoffs in 2023, 2024. Except that hasn't happened. They've had so much turmoil this year in Ottawa. He's only got one more year after this season, and they might be looking to move him to get the pieces they gave up back. So 24, 25, that's the age group right now, and that fits perfectly for our core. I mean, you put him into our top four, like we said with Noah Hannafin, who's a couple of years older at the moment, but you put Jakob Chychrun in this team, and I mean that's a massive move. Probably we're probably gonna see a defenseman brought in, whether that's a high end or medium end guy, but man, if they could swing a Jakob Chychrun trade without giving up, like a Seamus Casey or like the highest end prospects we have, and they just give up picks, I'd be totally for that. So we'll see what Tom's got up his sleeve, but I'm expecting a defensive move coming in like the next month.
Well, we're going to learn a lot about whether or not the Devils are still in the playoff race after these next three games against these Atlantic Division teams. They'll still be within the race, but their outlook on it will look very, very different based on whether or not they win or lose these games coming up. And that means that $10 million that they've got with Dougie Hamilton and the additional 1 million that they have uh, in the cap, what it's going to go to. And I think it's looking more and more like a defenseman is the way to go, and maybe perhaps a veteran forward presence who can sort of play two ways would be very helpful as well. It's no mystery that losing Dougie Hamilton and Jonas Siegenthaler for as long as they're going to lose them for is a massive, massive loss in what is an uphill battle for a playoff spot right now,
Yeah.
coupled with not having Jack Hughes, Andre Palat, Timo Meyer. They've got to do something, and they're going to have the opportunity to do it. It's only a matter of how big of a splash do they make with regards to a defenseman, and what profile of forward do they bring in. I think they're bringing in both, at least
Yeah.
one of each,
Yeah.
because this team is serious about being successful now. And if not, that means they bring in a goaltender. So we don't usually see deadline moves for goaltenders, at least not blockbuster deadline moves for goaltenders. So I find it more likely that they stick with the likes of Nico Daws, Schmid, and Vanacek long term, at least for the rest of this season, and then bring in something of a rental defenseman and forward, but one like Chychrun who you could, if things work out or shake out a way that they do, you could see about keeping them for another season on perhaps a retained budget, but even not because you're going to have the money to explore and pay some teams with Dougie going on long-term IR. It's a waiting game right now. They're going to have to win some games to pull up some cred, say that we're going to be a playoff team in order for players to want to sign that to sign off on that deal. But if they lose, they could be desperate. So I
Yeah.
don't know what direction they're going to go in, and it's going to really depend on how they play, I would say, up until the All-Star break, which is fast approaching.
Yeah. I think I've said for the most part, I don't think we trade for a massive goalie unless it's in the off season because
Hmm.
one, it's already hard enough to trade for goalies. Second,
Absolutely. It's one of the hardest
when
things.
when there's multiple teams looking for a goalie and multiple teams have extra pieces in goal, it gets even harder during the season because they're just gonna try to, up the price. Like come together, up a price. Like you could see Jake Allen go for a third, second round pick plus a prospect this year. I mean, that's insane. Those are insane prices. So that's why I said probably you if they were gonna bring in a goalie, it would have been in the offseason last year. So I'm expecting the D. I'm hoping it's one of the big guys as well, because again, you can add them to your core. You can re-sign them. They still have extra cap space going forward. With the cap going up, Corey Schneider comes off the books. So I can see one big move on D come to fruition.
You had to bring up Corey Schneider, man. Just imagine where the Devils would be if they had 2015 Corey Schneider.
Man.
Oh man. Oh man. Oh man. The things that they could be doing.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, let's talk a little bit about some international play. Corey Schneider did get to play in the Olympics, did get to play in a World Cup of hockey. So let's talk about the recent World Juniors gold medal that the U.S. took home in Gothenburg, Sweden. And what was a very chippy, excuse me, gold medal game.
Yeah, it was.
Seamus Casey of the Devils, 6 assists across the tournament, 6 points. Another of note in finish, I believe they finished third,
Fourth.
correct? Or they lost
They lost to Czechia.
to Czechia. Oh, they gave up 5 or 4 goals in like a minute,
Yeah.
right? All
Yeah.
right, I didn't see the third place game. I can't lie, but Lenny Hemenaho got 6 points as well. He
He had
was
two
one
goals
of the
in
more.
that bronze medal game, by the way.
There you go. He was one of
So
the more dangerous
he
pieces
scored
for the
yeah,
Finns.
he scored goal 4 and 5 before Czechia turned it around and won the bronze in surprising fashion.
You know
But
what? And congrats to Czechia for actually being, I would say, well, the surprise of the tournament was Canada being as bad as they were, but Czechia getting a
two straight
medal.
bronzes, by the way.
Yeah, good
Two
for
straight
them. Yeah,
bronzes. So
absolutely. Sweden 2 straight finals, but 2 straight final losses now. That's right, if I'm
yeah,
not mistaken.
they lost to Canada
So
last year. Yep.
that's brutal for them. As for the U.S., it was a good win. As for a couple Devils prospects, good showing. Could have been better. I was hoping for maybe one big moment from Seamus Casey, like we got from Luke Hughes, like we got from Seaman Damage. But I mean, it is what it is. I'm pleased with their performance, but it also led to another situation that upon the ending of the tournament, some news out of South Jersey, Philadelphia.
What a
Cutter
story!
Gauthier
What a
did
story,
not
man.
want to be a Philadelphia Flyer, demanded a trade. Danny Briere and Keith Jones were like, okay, we'll do that for you. And they bring in one of the best young defensemen in the Western Conference, and Jamie Drysdale. So I think that was actually a great deal for them. And the Ducks get a really good player. It's just so strange. What do you make of that? A young guy saying, "Yes, you're the team that drafted me, but I don't want to play for you." I heard he grew up a Penguins fan. Could that be what it
No,
is?
I know that the story is basically after BC's season last year, he came to them and was like, "All right, I'm ready to turn pro," and they came back to him and was like, "Nah, can't do that, guy. We have some bonus overages, so if we sign you, that will go over into next year. So right now we can't sign you. But if you want, we could sign you in the off season." So basically, he felt disrespected because he wanted to burn a year like Luke Hughes did, get to that second contract quicker than normal. So he felt
Hmm.
disrespected, and some players might be like, you know what, yeah, I'll wait. But with Cutter Gauthier, he's like, nah, I'm out of here. And you know what, Cutter, you're an American hero for saying that to the Flyers because nobody likes the Flyers, nobody likes Gritty. So shout
It's
out to
true.
you for getting the trade. And that, bro, he goes from Philadelphia to Southern California.
Pretty
What,
sweet.
like, you couldn't make that up. So shout out to Cutter Gauthier. As Devil fans, we love you, and we're gonna
Hey,
root for you now.
game recognized game, Cutter. Also, speaking of game, he was one of the best players for the U.S. in
Yep,
that World Junior win. So that's a big loss for the Flyers, but they ended up making good business out of it. So
they
and
got
it
what
gives
they
them
could
someone
have,
to hate.
but they
Yeah,
lost the
yeah.
trade, in
I
my
I
opinion.
I I think it's tough to say that trade's a loss when he hasn't played an NHL game yet. I'll eat my tongue if he becomes a superstar.
Yeah, we'll see.
But for now, they've got a pretty good piece on the blue line that the Devils would be very, very, very lucky to have right now as well. So I'll leave it at that. I love skimming on the Flyers though. It's great. But that's all the
Great
time that we're
story.
gonna have this week on Puck on the Parkway. We got a lot covered. I think it's gonna be a big week on the road for the Devils against the Lightning, Panthers, and Bruins. One that could decide their fate moving forward into the All-Star break, where they're gonna be in terms of the playoff picture. But for now, I'm James Burley, Daniel Reben saying so long. Thank you guys for joining us. We will see you guys next time.
See you guys.